Well, hello, everybody. I'm Heather Shoemaker. I'm the CEO of Language.io, and I apologize for the delay. We had some technical difficulties, but we're ready to get started now. So Language.io is a SaaS translation technology company, and we're very focused on the multilingual customer support space. So today in the App Exchange, you can find our apps that allow your monolingual, often English-speaking support teams to provide chat support in any language, to respond to cases in any language. We can automate the human or machine translation of your support articles, and we can also make your chatbots multilingual. And today I'm going to be talking about something that's on our product roadmap, slated for release by the end of the year, that's going to allow you to automate the process of spinning up LLM-powered multilingual chatbots that understand your company's domain-specific content. Before we dive straight into that, we're going to take a few minutes to recognize the sponsors, as we do, focusing very much on the Language.io logo. Just kidding, we love all of the sponsors, right? So you're all still here. So I'm going to take that as a sign that you've at least got enough patience to sit through one more presentation on generative AI, right? Like me, you probably come to the realization that generative AI, traditional AI, machine learning, all of the AIs are here to stay. But as business people, it's critical that we focus on where we should and shouldn't be employing generative AI within our organizations while we're still getting our heads around issues of data privacy, of domain adaptation, of hallucinations, right? And it's tough because this technology is evolving so quickly that what seemed really important 3 days ago isn't relevant today. I like to think of generative AI as a ridiculously intelligent toddler. It sounds well-spoken regardless of the topic. You can talk to it about anything, and it sounds like it knows. But just like the human toddlers that we all know and love, it might mix fact and fiction. And when you drop your toddler off at daycare, it is going to repeat everything you've ever said, especially the really embarrassing bits. So be careful what you say in front of your LLM. At Language.io, we're hyper-focused on making it safer and easier for companies to build out multilingual LLM-powered chatbots, and that's going to be the focus of my presentation. But before we dive straight into LLMs, I want to take a few minutes to level set all of us on the various types of chatbots that you can deploy in Salesforce today. We support our customers to make these multilingual all the time, the technology that underlies them, and then we'll move into the LLM version of them. Okay, let's kick it off with rules-based chatbots. Who here has spun up a rules-based or Dialogflow style chatbot in Salesforce? So I know who has what experience. Not very many of you. Okay. The rules-based chatbot is also what we call fixed-flow chatbots, and they're the easiest form of chatbot to get up and running, and they do a really good job with very specific tasks, right? But they're not very flexible. If your customer or if it's a pre-sales chatbot wants to deviate from the flow that you've defined in this chatbot, they're out of luck, and you're going to have to pass them on to a human support agent. Let's see here. Whoops. Oh, no. You guys, this is an old presentation. This is what happens when you have technical difficulties. Okay, I'm going to have to talk through it, but we're okay. Rules-based chatbots, not flexible. So the way they generally work is you're going to have a menu that you present to your customers. They only select from the menu options provided, right? So if what they're looking for is not in that menu, you have to pass them on to a human support agent, and that's why they're not very flexible. You can build out very elaborate flows, but then they're really difficult to maintain. So moving on to the next best chatbot, and I'm going to be surprised by whatever slide shows up, so just kind of work with me here. Traditional AI-powered chatbots. These guys are much more flexible because they do have true AI underlying them. But the way it works, who's spun up an AI-powered chatbot in Salesforce, in Einstein? Anybody? Okay, so this is new information I'm giving you. The way it works in Salesforce is with an AI bot, in Einstein, and this is true of many platforms, you have to define all of the types of question that you expect your customers or folks to ask. And then that's called an intent. So you have to build out a large base of intents. And for each intent, you define all of the utterances. And these are the ways that somebody might ask about that type of question. So to give you an example, in EinsteinBot, let's see if I have a, nope. In EinsteinBot, the way it works is you create a category, such as order status. That's a really common category, and I think that's even the default in there. So for order status, which is an intent, you have lots of ways you can ask about your order. You can say, what's the status of my order? You can say, where is my order? You can say, I haven't received my order. But, traditional AI is really good, much better than fixed flow bots, at parsing the free-form text that the customer enters when they ask the question, and then applying or determining the intent and applying that to this base of intent and utterance data. The problem comes when a customer asks a question for which you haven't defined a category. So what if your customer asks about returning something, right? And you haven't defined a category for that. You have to pass them on to a human agent. And the whole goal here, right, is to deflect as much as possible so the chatbot can field more of the questions and your human agents are having to field fewer of them because they're expensive. All right, so the be-all, end-all, generative AI powered by large language models. So the beauty of generative AI is that they're very flexible. And Forbes is super optimistic about generative AI. I refer to them as intelligent toddlers. Forbes refers to them as an imaginative friend who can come up with original creative content. Unfortunately, LLMs can be a little bit overly creative sometimes, right? That's the problem. But the beauty of generative AI is that they are deep learning networks. Do we have any data scientists in the room? I'll take that as a no. Okay. Don't worry, I'm not going to dive too deeply into this. But deep learning is a part or a form of machine learning. And it uses artificial neural networks, much like the human brain, or so we like to think, that learn from large quantities of data without needing explicit programming. And this is key, right? So like I was saying, in traditional AI, if you want to add a new category of questions so your bot can support that category, you have to go in and add explicit intent and utterance data for that category. With generative AI, you feed it more content, and it parses the content, it gets creative with the content, and figures it out. Now, the key here is that with the generative AI platforms like ChatGPT that we're all familiar with, or Bard, which is powered by Google Palm, they learn that large quantity of data that they learn from is the public internet. That's a lot of data, and that's a lot for these LLMs to parse and have access to, so they can answer most questions, provided that the information is in the public internet. So I hope that some of you have played with ChatGPT and are familiar with what I'm talking about. But the problem comes when you ask a question about data that it's never had access to. This is just logic. You don't have to be a data scientist to understand this. But let's take, for example, your company's proprietary data. I'm hoping it's not out there on the public internet, though, right? But I expect that if you're powering a chatbot with an LLM, your customers and folks interested in your solution are going to be asking questions about your company's public data or private data. And so a general LLM cannot help you there. It's not going to know anything about your private data. So training is required. And the problem here, I'm going to have to talk through this one, is that training AI is tough. We already talked about how we do that with traditional AI, with the intent and utterance data. With LLMs, there are a couple of ways to approach the training process and make that generative AI platform aware of your company's proprietary data. So you can start from scratch. You can build an LLM to rival ChatGPT, but who really wants to do that, right? That's a lot of work. So the way that most companies are attacking this, we call it domain adaptation. They are in some form fine-tuning or employing retrieval augmentation, something that adds on to a general LLM. So you still have all of that learning from the public internet. In addition to that, you have your company's proprietary data that you have somehow used to fine-tune a general LLM. So that's the process. Now, unfortunately, I don't know if I made that sound difficult or easy, but it's not easy, right? It requires experts to perform that work. And according to Gartner, 81% of companies find the process of training a single, not even multilingual, but monolingual AI-based chatbot far more difficult than they expected it would be. So bear in mind, so far we're only talking about one language, and our whole shtick here is to provide chatbots in multi-languages. There's a company, an AI company in Spain called Artificial Solutions, and they did some research and determined that when companies are faced with duplicating all that training across all of the languages, like 10, 20 languages that their company needs to support, they're simply abandoning the effort because that's an exhausting proposition. So this is where Language I/O comes in. We're going to automate that process for you. I'm excited to see what my next slide is because I truly do not know. All right, generative AI doesn't know anything. So let me level set a little bit. Before we dive into how we're going to solve this problem, I just wanted to have a little bit of fun and show you a few examples of what happens when you ask ChatGPT a question about a domain-specific question that it hasn't really been trained on yet, right? So as with the Demo Jam presentation that we did yesterday, I'm going to use the very exciting domain of ice hockey, and I'm going to use some slang and a nickname. Let me see. Oh, geez, these aren't even my slides. All right, I'm just going to wing it here. So how does the Language I/O chat translation app for Salesforce determine the language of the customer? So what it's telling me here, and this is what happens when you have an LLM that is not trained on a data set, or you're asking it a question about information that was posted to the internet after it was trained. LLM data goes stale really quickly. That's one of the problems, in addition to asking it questions about data that it was never trained on. So in this case, I asked it a question about our app. How does Language I/O chat translation for Salesforce determine the language of the customer? And it's telling me that it doesn't have that information. In reality, this information has been there for a while, but it's domain-specific information. It's information that we've hidden. So we're going to have to train the LLM using one of these mechanisms that I described for it to get the access that it needs. And this is just another example in the translation context. And we're going to just move forward. OK. I don't have any of my slides. My laptop wasn't connecting properly, so we had to get an old version. I'm going to just go through. I think I can talk you guys through some of this. We'll wrap it up quickly, though, I promise. Back to my hockey analogy. So in the domain of ice hockey, it's really common for sports fans to come up with nicknames, right, for their favorite athletes. This is super common. And the Colorado Avalanche, one of our star players, is Mikko Rantanen. And we call him the Moose. I won't go into why. The Moose is a great player, but unfortunately, LLMs don't really know what we're talking about when we ask about the Moose. So what I did, just to see what happened, is I asked ChatGPT, how many goals did the Moose score during Wild Avalanche games during the 2019-2020 season? Because this is information that it should have access to. It was trained up until data on 2021. So what ChatGPT said to me was, first, it questions whether it actually has access to that data, but it says, it's pretty smart. It says, if you're referring to a specific player nicknamed Moose, please provide me with the player's full name. You know, that's the right thing to do. It's telling us that it doesn't have access to that data. But then it says something funny. If you're referring to an actual moose, they are not players in hockey games. I know, that's when it sounds like a toddler. All right, so if you've ever launched ChatGPT, and I'm hoping some of you guys have launched ChatGPT because you'll know what I'm talking about here, you get this little window, and I'm having to use hand gestures because my slides aren't there. So what happens is before you use it, it tells you, it warns you. You can ask away, but don't share sensitive information because I'm going to keep it, basically, is what it's saying, right? So this is where we have to be careful. If you follow ChatGPT in the news, you might have heard the example of some Samsung software developers who decided to try to use ChatGPT to solve a coding problem. So they were cutting and pasting source code into ChatGPT. And honestly, I don't know if ChatGPT answered their or fixed their solution, their code. What I do know is that ChatGPT went on to share that Samsung source code with other users of ChatGPT outside of the organization with similar problems. This is just one example where it's been sharing proprietary information. So if you are going to integrate an LLM into your business processes, I implore you, do not use a version or an LLM that's going to hold on to your data. There are platforms out there that, like Language IO, will be zero trace, meaning whatever you pass into it, it does not hold on to. And that's critical in the world of customer support. If we're processing support chats or emails, they're full of personal data. And if a platform like ChatGPT is holding on to that data, that's bad. That's exposing your customers' data to breach where it shouldn't be. So that's really something to pay attention to. And then it says, check your facts. That's one of the standard warnings it gives you because it is, like a toddler, prone to making things up. So I had really cool slides to show you about this part, but I'm sorry I can't show them. I now want to talk about how Language IO is going to help you solve this problem. So we're going to do it in two different phases. Phase one is where we're going to first solve the problem of privacy and domain adaptation, and then we're going to get to language translation. So we've already integrated a couple LLM platforms that have agreed in writing with Language IO to be zero trace. This means that when we pass support chats or whatever it is, content for processing, the LLM platforms that we've integrated into our stack will not hold on to that content because we're zero trace. We can only work with subprocessors that are also zero trace. So that's step one. We're not spinning up our own LLM. We're using those general LLMs that have been trained on the entire internet, which is, intelligence that you want to have in your system. But we're only working with secure ones. So that's step one. Then what about domain adaptation, right? Like I was just describing to you, it's not going to be able to answer your customers' questions about your proprietary information that's not out there on the internet. So one service that Language IO has been offering for years is automating the translation of your knowledge base, right? So we already have apps that hook into Salesforce Knowledge and extract all of your FAQs, all of your support articles. That is the ideal corpus for fine-tuning or otherwise domain adapting an LLM. So what we're going to be doing is vectorizing that content and using it to domain adapt through a variety of these techniques I've been describing, an instance of this general LLM. So not only does it have access to the public internet, it also has access to your company's proprietary information. And now we can spin up chatbots that can actually answer questions about so many things in a very creative way. Operationally, what that means is because we're only talking about one language right now, right? So we're still going to have customers asking questions in all the languages. If your company supports Chinese, for example, but the base language of your support team is English, you're going to have Chinese chats coming in. The Language IO translation layer that already exists in Salesforce will translate that Chinese chat into English for your support team. And then it can first go through your LLM-powered chatbot. And this chatbot is going to be able to deflect so many more support sessions from your human support team because they're so flexible in what they can respond to. I mean, they've got the entire public internet as well as this domain-adapted layer, right? So that's going to be awesome. Still, some questions are going to have to be passed on to your human support agents. And for that, our translation layer will still be valid as well. We've already translated the question into, say, English. Doesn't matter, it can be any language. So the human support agent can respond, and then it passes back through our translation layer where we translate it back into Chinese for the customer. So that is phase one. Phase two, you can probably guess where we're headed now. The reason we suck out all of this support article content is so we can translate it. We employ a combination of human and machine translation, so we get really high quality translations of all your support articles. And we've got the content now to actually domain adapt, fine-tune an instance of that LLM for every language that you need to support. So phase 2 is we've now spun up a native-speaking LLM-powered chatbot for every language that your company needs to support. They can field all of the questions initially. They will be able to deflect a very high percentage of your customer support questions or pre-sales questions. And then, of course, if they can't answer any of the questions, it will be passed on to the human support agent. You can still maintain a monolingual support team because our translation layer still kicks in and provides these really accurate for your business translations to the human support team as well. So that wraps it up for now. I'm sorry about all the technical difficulties and you didn't get to see my cool slides, but I think we've got a little, nope, we're out of time. If you want to ask questions, we do have a table out there. Just look for the Language.io table. So thanks everybody for your patience.